We have a few exciting speakers and guests tonight. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Adrian from HackerDuce. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Woo.
Welcome to HackerDuce. So we're a nonprofit educational facility here in Cambridge, and our focus is data science, tools and technologies, and methods of analysis. We have a ton of events here, a lot of meetups with groups such as Boston Data Mining, Boston Data Scientists, Boston Predictive Analytics, New England Artificial Intelligence, to name a few. Our funding comes from corporate sponsorships in the state of Massachusetts, including IBM, Dell, Microsoft, EMC, a lot of the venture capital firms here in the state, and if you like hackathons, this is a place to definitely check out. We've had now maybe 15 or so this past year. I know a lot about hackathons, so if you're organizing them, if you like to talk about them, I can talk your ear off all day long with my experiences and putting them together. We've had hackathons focused on numerous open source technologies such as Storm and Finagle, Elasticsearch, Hadoop. I've hosted several hackathons with government, including the Mass Department of Transportation, the Department of Energy, and the Department of Defense. And I've hosted other hackathons, like we hosted a Packathon here, a Pakistan hackathon, that was really cool. And I'd like to tell you about a couple that we have coming up in March. I'm hosting a hackathon with Mashable and Emirates on March 22nd. That's a great one to come to because if you win Mashable, it's obviously going to get some good press there. So, and the prize is actually trips to Dubai. Emirates is sponsoring, so some free plane tickets. It'll be pretty fun. The following weekend, we're hosting a hackathon with Berkeley College of Music, and it will be a music therapy themed hackathon. And because you guys are in the healthcare space, I'll also tell you about July, we're having a bioinformatics hackathon. So check that out. And all of our events are listed on our site at hackerduce.org/calendar. You can also follow us on Twitter. And if you have any questions about the space, I'll be here. We also have a no pizza left behind policy. So if Andrea has other plans for it, please let us know. But otherwise, take some home with you. And yeah, that's it. Thanks.
They actually hosted our hackathon last March.
It was awesome.
It was pretty badass. It was awesome. So thanks so much to HackerDuce. So now Allie's going to tell you a little bit more about our March event.
Yes, so we're super excited. We have already received a ton of enthusiasm about this event. It's going to be our biggest event to date. We do know that we have yet to send you a reply from your application. We've had over 255 applications so far, and there's still 2 weeks to go, and we know that everyone procrastinates on these things. So we promise to respond to you by this weekend. But you guys are all awesome for coming out early, so consider yourselves unofficially accepted. But as you know, we are still having incoming applications. So if you could tell your friends or anyone that you think would be interested, please spread the word. We still have, or as you know, we have 5 tracks for this hackathon. We have the MGH CamTech and MIT IMES Global Health Tech track. We have the Hospital CIO, or otherwise known as the John Malonka Challenge track. We have the MGH Telehealth and Mobile track. We have a Rare Disease track, and we have, sponsored by Global Genes. And we have the Jaws on Diabetes track. So please spread the word, and we appreciate it, and we are super excited that you came tonight. So Andrea will introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, so the whole goal of today's event, and we're videotaping for those that couldn't be here, is to really get you thinking over the next 2 weeks about what you're going to pitch at the event. The pitch is the heart of the hackathon, and when you'll be pitching is the Saturday morning. And Ellie and Jackie are going to really talk about the different elements of a pitch and what makes it important. But just so you know more about the people that are going to be teaching you about the pitch, they are just not only people that Ellie and I in Hacking Medicine truly respect, but they're just our close personal friends and mentors and just wonderful human beings as well. October 2012 MIT Hackathon, MIT Hacking Medicine event. Elliot actually was the founder of Hacking Medicine at MIT with our faculty advisors and two. Him along with TJ Parker, co-founder now CEO of PillPack, started PillPack at that event. So they came out of a hackathon. In a 1.5 year period, they are now live, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in over 40 states.
33. Close up.
30
Rounding
up.
up.
And 2.5 weeks ago, they had an incredible launch. Literally all of Boston and beyond, the health tech community was in a flurry over this launch. It was, to quote Scott Kirsner, one of the best launches that he's ever seen without the hiring of a major PR firm. And it's all because of Miss Jackie Miller, who leads up the communication and marketing efforts at PillPack. So in terms of pitching and thinking about how to describe the pain points and getting the word out there about what you want to work on, I can think of no better people to do that. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce Jackie and Elliot. Woo-hoo!
All right. Hi. All right. First thing we're gonna do is be the annoying people who make you move forward. Just get up.
Crowded.
Crowded.
Interactive events. You need to be close. You gotta
These
feel
chairs
the
look
body.
comfortable. You
Yeah.
need to just get.
These also have tables, which you're gonna need.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, if you're not around a table, you're not gonna get the same thing out of it.
I see. No, you look so cozy. I know, but forward.
So while you guys are all moving forward, we will start briefly introducing ourselves. I'm Elliot Cohen, one of the co-founders, along with TJ Parker of PillPack. And we're going to go in a second and talk a bit more in depth about what PillPack is, but the simple version of it is we're a full-service pharmacy, and we want to make it delightfully simple for you to take your medication. Before we dive into what PillPack is in more detail, I would love for Jackie to introduce herself.
Sure. So that's me. I also wear your sunglasses on. I am the director of marketing and communications at PillPack. I was fortunate enough to know these guys back before they started PillPack, and was pretty enamored with the company when they started it, and had the good timing to be in a place to join them last September, and have been helping build out communications, marketing, finding our customers, telling our story since then. So that's me. That's Elliot. What we'd like to do is take a minute for you guys to just say hi to each other. I don't know if anyone goes to November Project here. Does anyone do that? Yeah, all right. So one of the things that is great about that is it's fun.
Let's go. Come on, people.
Let's do an example of what we do in the morning at November Projects. So we can set up. So I'm Jackie.
I'm Caitlin.
So nice to meet you. I'm so glad you're here. That's what we do. So do that. Introduce yourself to the person next to you. Anytime we see a group of people like this that come out on, I don't even know what day it is, Thursday night, on a Thursday night, it's Thursday, fun day, to come here and learn a little bit about pitching and talk about healthcare and startups. It warms our heart in ways we can't talk about in public. So we are thrilled you're here, and would like to learn a little bit about what you're hoping to get out of tonight before we go forward. So who wants to volunteer about why you came here to spend a few hours of your life? There's beer, there's pizza, and...
What are the other reasons that you're here?
Sure, I had no idea what it was about, so I just thought I'd come out and see it.
Totally fair answer.
Actually, echoing his sentiment, the first time I've been to one of these, so I was interested to
What
check
is
out
one of these?
these types of hackathon events.
Okay, so you're planning on going in March,
Sure.
and this is your, I mean, I know
I was
you
just
do it get to find out what it is?
Exactly.
Okay.
This is the
Okay.
first stage in checking it out.
Awesome, got it.
Okay. Yeah.
How do you take an engineer and turn them into a salesperson?
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Steal ideas and find partners and try.
I don't love the word steal, but touche.
Borrow.
Anybody borrow? Thank
Adapt.
you. Adapt.
Borrow.
Yes. Make your own. Yeah.
We never call PR spin, but
Very smart.
Others. One last one.
What makes a winning pitch?
What makes a winning pitch? All right, great.
Awesome.
Perfect. These are all good things. So we're going to start first with a little bit of the PillPack story. So you heard a tiny bit of it from Andrea. I think to add a little bit of context to that, PillPack really genuinely came out of this community in every way. TJ and I were some of the early people who started Hacking Medicine together. Jackie was also involved, actually. Jackie and I actually met at a health tech talk event with Todd Park, which was sort of the early seed of Hacking Medicine. That was the moment in time we all got especially inspired and said, this is we've got to create more of this in this community. And so a lot of us, not only did the idea initially get worked on at a hackathon, but actually the early team members all really knew each other from going to these kinds of events and from helping to organize them. So I want to encourage you guys, if this is what you're interested in, even if you don't have a specific idea, I really do encourage you to get involved. This is the best place to learn more about what challenges exist in healthcare, what problems are we're solving, and also to meet the people that you're ultimately going to work with, both as co-founders and also as early colleagues in your company. So on the left here, that is actually what we pitched at the Hacking Medicine event in October 2012. On the right here is all of Jackie's amazingly hard work, which resulted in over 40 articles earlier this month, one of which was in the Wall Street Journal, which was our big goal. We really wanted a Wall Street Journal piece. And we did. We got a fantastic piece in the Wall Street Journal. And as you can see, the elements of the idea are all there, right? Actually, not that much in principle, in some sense, has changed since the October 2012 hackathon. So you can see how ideas really can coalesce quite quickly. Of course, the finish and the sort of refinement is really what makes this idea work, and that's what has changed. And that was all the hard work. So I don't want to make it sound like most of the work happens over the weekend, because it doesn't. Most of the work happens after the fact. But it really is true that the seed of that idea, the sort of moment in which you kind of look at it and go, wow, this really should exist, I think it really does oftentimes happen in those hackathons. So what PillPack does, we deliver all of one's medications in what we call unit dose packets. So this is an example of one of those. If you took medications, let's say Monday 8 a.m., all of the meds that you took at that moment in time would come in a packet just like this. And these packets are stitched together into a big roll, which you can see there. Roll comes in a nice little dispenser box. And if you take any medications that don't fit in the packets, it could be an inhaler, it could be an injectable, those come in the same box, and we ship to you every 2 weeks. I think what is really at the core of this idea and the problem that we're really trying to solve is it really sucks to take medication. And I don't mean it sucks to be sick, I mean it literally sucks to take medication. It sucks to go to the pharmacy a bunch of times a month. It sucks to argue with your insurance company. It sucks to remember to follow up with your doctor for refills. And what PillPack does is it solves all of those problems by creating a delightfully simple service that makes it easy to just get and take your medications without having to worry about it. We oftentimes think of this as many things in medicine are hard. We can't always fix those, but let's at least make the easy stuff easy. So that's what we've set out to do.
How did you get around the insurance? You said that people, they have to argue with their insurance. I think, is there anything in your product that kind of gets around that or anything like that? Or?
Yeah, so most of those, I think most of the time a person is negotiating, so to speak, with their insurance company, they're really the worst person to do it because they're technically the only one who has a relationship with their insurance company. The flip side is they're not the physician and they're not the pharmacist, so they know nothing about why the med got denied and they know nothing about what the alternatives are. The pharmacist is one of the best people to argue with the insurance company because the insurance company is not trying to say, look, we don't want to cover medication for you. What they're really saying is, we don't want to cover exactly that medication. And what you have to figure out from the insurance company is it exactly that med? Like, is there truly an equivalent? Or is the equivalent a meaningfully different experience? Maybe they don't want the person taking a once daily pill. They have another equivalent that's 3 times a day. And the doctor says, I really don't want the patient doing it. They're already having trouble with adherence. This is a meaningful impact to their health. I really want there to be an extra, what's called prior authorization. I want the insurance company to really cover this. It's important medically for this person. And the doctor and the pharmacy are really the people in a position to have that negotiation, but it's not a role that a CVS or Walgreens thinks is their job today, and we think it's our job.
So from a commercial aspect, are you marketing more to PBM, special needs plans, or B2C? Who do you typically go after?
Yeah.
I'm not jumping ahead in your presentation.
You're not. I was going to talk too much more about PillPack. The main story elements of the PillPack story are really more about explaining where it came from, so you guys can understand the connection between what you're participating in tonight and hopefully in March, and what might come out of that. But to answer your question, we are trying to build a consumer brand. So our goal is to build a company that both markets and ultimately sells directly to the end consumer. And I think that most of healthcare today is not designed around the end consumer or the end patient. And the reason for that is that's not really their customer. The customer is really the physician, or it's the insurance company, or it's the hospital. I'm using hospital broadly to mean health system. And because of that, you end up designing for those people. You don't design for the end consumer. We think it's really important that this be designed around the consumer. But if that's going to really happen, then the business actually has to be structured around that. So that means we have to find a way to get directly to our end customer, which we want to be that consumer.
And I'd point out that from the time you guys started this idea, which was at Hacking Medicine, like coming up with a pitch, one of the core elements of the pitch was really that it was going to be for a consumer. And I think it's, I don't think when you go to pitch an idea at a hackathon, you necessarily have to have all of, every little thing worked out. But having some core tenets, like, this is the problem we believe we're solving, and this is the person we're solving it for, is super, super important. And one of the things that I always loved about PillPack from the beginning was that they said, this is the problem. It's hard to manage medications, and we're going to solve it for the individual who's doing that. We're not going to solve it for the hospital. We're not going to solve it for their physician. We're going to solve it for this person. And that's one of the things that I think has helped them be really successful, was that identification of both the problem and the person who is experiencing the problem. Which I think is really well.
Which is perfectly where we're going next.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Quick question. I mean,
Yeah.
How does it address medication reconciliation? What was your experience with that?
So one thing I think that's less obvious in this idea, but really interesting about it, is it uses design to create an excuse for the customer to centralize all their medications with us. One of the medical benefits of doing that is that most people are actually not on the right medications. It's not an especially well-studied topic, but the studies that are out there suggest it's something like 60 or 70% of all people are not on the right medication. So really, it's a staggering problem. And the reason they're not is because nobody's actually doing what's called medication reconciliation, as you pointed out. And what that is for everybody else is somebody needs to review the med list and say, yeah, these are actually really the right meds for you. And the reason there's no one doing that, it's not anybody's fault. It's just because we don't have a very coordinated healthcare system. If you're on 10 meds, you probably have 3 different doctors or 5 different doctors, and they each prescribe different things over different time frames and didn't necessarily talk to each other, and might not necessarily know each other's specialties all that well. And the net result is probably not a series of medications that's actually dangerous for you, but it's also not quite the right set for you either. And the role in most societies on the planet of the pharmacist is actually to act as that person who's reconciling those medications, but the business model in America doesn't support that, and so we don't do it that way. And one of the big things, an example of a thing that we think we can solve, is we think by creating a reason for people to centralize their medications for us, and also by automating a lot more of the pharmacist's job in the back end, so they're not just counting pills, which is mostly what they do in a CVS. We can free them up to do the things they're really trained to do, which is study the medication list, really effectively provide care, right? Find out, is this person experiencing side effects? If so, which ones? What medications would help mitigate those side effects? What would be a better set of medications for this person? And I think actually this kind of gets to the heart of our original strategy, and I will parlay it into this statement in just a second. I think for us, we felt it was very important to solve this problem of actually being a pharmacy, and this is a great example of why. You can imagine us selling all the components of what we do as different products or services or technologies, but you can't really imagine us solving all the problems that we solve unless it's actually all wrapped together, because together is what allows us to get involved and do things like medication reconciliation. If we weren't the actual care provider, we wouldn't really get the opportunity to do that. So this brings us to one of the big take-homes we want to leave you with tonight. We're going to talk to you mostly about how to frame your idea, how to talk about your idea, but let's not confuse the topic. You can't have a good pitch without a good idea. At the heart of this thing, there needs to be a unique, novel, interesting idea that genuinely adds value. If that doesn't exist, go back to the drawing board and keep working on it.
Which is one of the reasons why Andrea, who I love to death, when she says that I did a great job, I love that compliment, but it's also part of doing a great job is having an awesome product to pitch. It makes it, having worked for a number of companies with different interesting solutions as a consultant, it is much, much easier to have a good pitch when you have a good idea. So we're going to talk to you just a little bit about, especially at a hackathon, when you're coming up with the idea to begin with. It's your choice whether you're going to have a good idea or a bad idea. So I want to help you a little bit think about how to come up with those ideas so that what you're working on for the weekend is something that can translate into a great pitch and hopefully then a great company.
So I should also point out, interrupt us with questions anytime. We want this to be interactive,
Yeah.
so feel free to interrupt. What do we
You guys over there too. Love it.
Jackie, what do we mean by problems on technologies?
All right, so there are tons of technologies in the world that could do interesting things. I think MIT is an amazing place to find cool technologies, but the way to start, I think, at a hackathon is to pick a problem, not a technology. Which is why hacking medicine is so amazing, because you get all of these people in the room, and some of those people are going to be physicians and caregivers and people who are on the ground, if you will, daily, working in the healthcare system and understanding those problems. So Elliot's co-founder, TJ, is a pharmacist, so he understood this problem from the very beginning, and he had no idea what it was going to take to solve the problem of how difficult it is to manage medications, but picked out that problem and said, this is a pain point, this is a thing that irritates people every day in their life, and I want to go about fixing it, however I'm going to do that. So one of the things we'd encourage you to do when you get to a hackathon is to find the people who understand the problems and pick them out. And they're not going to be, they may be your engineers, they may be your designers or your marketers, but try to find the people who really understand those problems. And if it's you, be forthcoming with those. Like, take some time ahead of it to think about what the problems are that you want to solve. And try to identify those and then find the technologies that best fit the problems.
I think one thing to add to that, and actually TJ is a great example of this, a lot of people know that medication adherence is a problem, and I knew this going into the event. The reason it is so important to find somebody like TJ who doesn't just know that sort of in the abstract it is a problem, but really understands the problem in a deep and nuanced way, is to TJ, it actually was not a medication adherence problem. I think most of the world thinks that the problem with people not taking their medications is a medication adherence problem. And when they frame it that way, you immediately start thinking about the cost of it, you start thinking about the insurance impact, you start thinking about how physicians care about this problem. What you forget is what it feels like to a patient. Because no patient thinks the medication adherence is a problem. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, man, it's really bad adherence problem. I just wish I was more adherent to my medication. Nobody says that. It just doesn't exist. But everybody does. 50% of all prescriptions are not taken correctly. And I think what TJ really understood about that problem, and one thing he really owned from the very beginning, and it's really driven the vision of the company, is that it's really frustrating to take your medication. It really sucks, it's stressful, it's filled with hassle, and people hate doing it. And that all results in you not taking your medication correctly. So it's not that the rest of the world is wrong that we have a medication adherence problem, but the actual user does not have an adherence problem. The actual user has a frustration, a hassle, a complexity problem. And that really, that framing is the problem in and of itself. So you have to be clear that when you're picking a problem, you're really framing the problem correctly, and that in and of itself is part of making sure that you have truly chosen the correct problem, because it'll lead you to what the solution is.
I have a question.
Sure.
In terms of the problem, the healthcare landscape is very fragmented and very complicated. How do you address whose problem you're solving, who's paying for that problem, even though it's not their problem?
Great question.
Great question.
Stellar question.
Not even planned.
Yeah. I don't even know your name. Yeah, I think one of the things, as you're coming up with your problem, not your technology, and finding someone who understands it, if you're the person who is coming to the table with the, I think this is a problem, that's awesome. And if you're the other person, what you can do is talk to them and say, like, okay, so let's dig into this and figure out, is it an adherence problem? Not really, it's a frustration problem. Who's it frustrating for? So finding that customer makes it a lot easier to really say, like, here's who we're solving for. You can put a face to it, you can put an experience to it, you can put a life story to it, and you can begin to really understand, like, is this actually going to make it easier or better for them, or am I just still solving kind of an abstract problem with abstract technology?
I think healthcare, you make a great point. Healthcare, more so than probably any other industry, you have to choose who your customer is, because same thing with us, right? We could have been actually a medication adherence company, and our customer could have been a PBM or an insurance company or the healthcare system. There's probably viable businesses in all of those, but it just isn't the business that we wanted to start. And when we chose our customer as being the end consumer, it was part of it. It went into that entire framing of exactly what problem are we truly solving, and how are we solving it, and what's the business model. and knowing who the customer was and how we were framing the problem were quintessential to making the rest of those downstream decisions. And so I think you have to pick those things up front. And medication adherence is a particularly interesting one to me for thinking about sort of who the customer is, because you see there's a huge field of medication adherence technologies out there that were nominally designed for the consumer, but actually weren't really, right? The consumer was never going to pay for them. And so the company ended up failing because they tried to go out there and act like the consumer was their true customer, when in fact, the only person who was going to pay for it the way that they structured it was really a drug company or an insurance company or something like that. So it's really critical that you pick that customer early on.
And a slightly less fuzzy way to say this that you hear a lot is follow the money. Like, just figure out who's going to pay for it and trace that back to what you're going to deliver. I think Elliot and I are fuzzy people, so we like to think about our customers, but you could also frame this as, figure out who's going to pay for it and go for that. So, yeah, strive for simple and unique. I think this is something at the hackathons I've been to in the past that people can get caught up in. You can have a really interesting idea, and you have a bunch of people around the table, and everyone adds a piece to it, and then you have this kind of octopus-like solution that's going to reach out and touch 8 different things and fix them all, and it's going to be wonderful. And I think as you're ideating about things, try to just keep simplifying and keep thinking about how is this different? How are we the unique team that's going to build this simple thing that's going to fix a problem? Sure, yeah.
So, how did you form your team? Like, did you go in like knowing TJ and knowing what you were going to do, or did you form a team when you were at?
Both. So TJ and I, so the more complete version of that story is that TJ had been wanting to start a company that roughly used these packets, but sold directly to consumers for years. And he and I had known each other for about 3 years by this point. And he kept telling me about this idea and saying, hey, like, do you have any interest in working on this? And frankly, actually, at the time, it never made sense to me. The way he articulated it, it sounded like this weird online pharmacy thing that was super sketchy. I didn't get it. But I really liked him, so I kept saying, like, yeah, no, we should talk about this more. But we kept actually not really talking about it. I kept like not really getting over the hump of understanding it. And so finally, I said, we tell everybody else to do this. Why don't we just take this thing to Hacking Medicine? We've got one coming up in October. Let's put other people in charge of it, and let's just actually hack at it. And so we did that, and that was really the catalyst. At least for me. I mean, I think TJ was always committed to starting a company around that. But for me, it was in that weekend, in that moment, that all of a sudden it really did click. And I was like, oh my God, this is totally a company. This needs to exist. And we did meet a team while we were there. We recruited a couple friends ahead of time to come with us, so we knew we had some on the team. But did recruit 2 or 3 more people while we were there. And we wouldn't have accomplished nearly as much as we did without them. We had a designer there who did an amazing job sort of taking this kind of broad abstract idea and turning it into a sort of physical box prototype that I think really brought it alive for a lot of people. So I do fundamentally believe that the hackathon is a great place to meet people we really wouldn't have met otherwise and end up collaborating. Smart Scheduling is probably an even better example of exactly that happening. So I don't know if you guys know, Andrew is the co-founder of another company that came out of Hacking Medicine. And I remember at the beginning of the weekend, she was like, hey, do you mind? I don't think I'm going to help organize. I think I'm going to help this team. And at least to me, it sounded like a completely last-minute decision. It may not actually have been, but that's what it sounded like to me at the time. And that's my memory of it. And it turned out to be a new company that she ended up co-founding with the other people at that event. So I really do think you should expect and should count on meeting diverse people that have different skill sets that can help you figure out really what is the right solution to the problem you're interested in solving.
But today I moved into PillPack offices, so just a great example of once you're part of the Hacking Medicine ecosystem of it all, you can't get out.
Little incestuous community, so don't miss anybody else because you're yeah.
So without getting bogged down in the details, how do you get into your barriers to entry? Meaning, like when you go to the hackathons, you're not just stopping your own idea. How do you start to identify, especially with you with compliance initiatives?
Sure.
So many parts of the universe that can say, stop, you can't do this. How do you get into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hackathon is a great opportunity to try to identify what your core risks are and try to get some of those out on the table. So sometimes those kinds of things are the core risks, and you should think about those. This is where TJ's background was so unique. His father had owned and operated a number of different pharmacies over his lifetime. TJ worked in most of those pharmacies, so he really knew this industry well. So most of the things that would be blockers for your kind of normal MIT technology team, Things that would be very daunting, like getting licensed in 33 states or getting licensed in
On
one
our
state,
way
on our way to 50, buying robots that package medications, knowing what workflow to use inside the pharmacy. I mean, those things to me as a technologist that are just inconceivable to learn about. He knew those like the back of his hand. And I think for him, it was the software approach. Right? He was kind of like, yeah, how does one? I know this is buildable, but I have no clue how. And I'm like, yeah, that's easy, don't know. So hopefully your team helps you knock down some of those. So part of hacking medicine is, we've always said none of these problems are actually rocket science, but it's hard to have the right expertise at the right time. And that was a lot of the vision of hacking medicine, was hopefully we get enough of the right people in the room from very different backgrounds that things that you thought were big blockers, you learn actually aren't that big a blocker, or you learn how to work around them. But I do think you want to spend the weekend trying to air out, what are the things that not make this challenging to start, what are the things that are the difference between this being viable and not being viable? You want to focus on those for the weekend.
Yeah, and I think we spent some time at IDEO as a startup in residency, and they're a design firm, and I forget, let me get it right, they have messaging, a global design and innovation firm. And one of the things that was really amazing about being there was they have this way of suspending reality while they're thinking about a problem. So thinking about, this is the problem, how are we going to solve this? They don't focus initially on what are the limitations of technology or red tape or barriers, and really just suspend reality and think about how you would solve it in a world where you can do whatever you want. And once you kind of think that way, then it's a lot easier to say, like, okay, so this is what we want to do. Let's figure out what are our barriers, rather than feeling constrained by the real world while you're thinking about a solution.
And you do still need to come back. By the end
Sure.
of the weekend,
you need to come back and think about it. But when you have that sort of like, here's how we really go about solving this. What is actually in our way of carrying this out?
Could you talk a little bit about how the mentors in the hackathon helped you during 2 days, or if there were any lessons?
That's actually a good question. So they didn't help us, I think is the short version. They helped us a tiny bit. There were a couple of VCs there that we all knew because we'd invited them. And it was useful because it was a safe environment to litmus test what version of the story was going to resonate best with them. I think, this is a side note, I think raising money is very similar to selling to a customer, so you have to practice and you have to find out what their objections are going to be. The difference is that you can sometimes get a second chance with when you're selling to a customer, and you rarely get a second chance with an investor. So you need to find safe spaces to not sound like you're actually pitching, to try to figure out what their hangups are going to be. So you can go think about those, come up with an answer, and then come back and actually pitch for real. That was a little bit helpful. For us, that wasn't that helpful, but I think that's mostly because our team just really had the right skills on the team. We had a designer, we had 2 designers. I have a software background. TJ knew this industry just perfectly. And then we had 2 physicians on the team as well. So between that group, we were mentoring each other. I mean, we were getting an unbelievable amount of support and advice out of that. I think what I've seen other teams get out of it is sometimes you do see technology-heavy teams, or you see medically heavy teams, and they get a lot of benefit from mentors because the mentors help fill in the skills that they don't have. And hopefully there's enough sort of very experienced mentors in each area, both mentors on kind of what products are sort of viable in terms of what can be built, and you get a lot of sort of business more kind of strategy people, and you get a lot of people who are medically oriented, physicians, nurses, caregivers, whatever, who can talk more deeply about the problem space. And so they'll, if you have one of those areas in your team that you're a little weaker in, then mentors can help fill that in. Cool. Okay, so.
All right, so the way we're going to approach talking about pitching tonight is through the lens of a positioning statement. This is something that I think if you've had any marketing background, your eyes may glaze over because it's a little bit marketing speak. But I actually think when you're thinking about pitching, this is incredibly useful. Because what your task in having a good pitch is to stand up in front of a group, fit your idea into a slot in their brain where it makes sense and where it's a viable solution in the span of 60 seconds. So a positioning statement is it's finding that place in your audience's brain that you want your product to fit. So if you're a BMW, you want to fit somewhere north of Volkswagen, south of Jaguar, on the far end of performance. And that's kind of, for your ideas and your solutions, you want to be able to take that idea for the person that's listening to you and plug yourself right in there. It's really challenging. And I think we want to be clear that I know for you guys for pitching PillPack at the Techstars demo day, that was over weeks and weeks of practicing. So what we want to give you tonight is just the tools to think about a good pitch. We're not going to make you absolute experts when you leave here tonight, but I want you to have the tools so you can evaluate a pitch and say like, yeah, we're getting close, or no, we're still really far away. Yeah.
But kind of like when you're starting out, right? Like BMW is kind of more established. So if you're starting out, you may not necessarily know who your audience is or who they want to be. So you kind of keep that in mind when you do a positioning where you say, so no, you don't.
I think the way you figured out the answer to that question is you have a hypothesis and then you go knock it down.
Right.
So what you don't want to do is pitch and say, it might be for this audience, we're not sure, it might also be for this other audience. You're going to leave everyone super confused. What works way better, and it actually just will teach you faster about whether it's a good idea or not, is you say, it is for this audience and this is the thing that we're solving. And luckily, like you're hoping that someone in the audience is like, I'm exactly that person, I think this is stupid. Like, oh, okay, actually, it's not for them. Let me try that again.
Right.
I think it's for this audience over here. And you'll just learn way faster if you make a statement, because everyone will actually understand it, and they'll be able to much more quickly say to you, no, that doesn't make any sense. That's actually totally wrong.
Right. Exactly. So the idea is, for a pitch, come hard to the hoop. Like, say what you're going to do, say who you're going to do it for, say why it's going to work. Don't waffle. You know, come up, I think at the end of your weekend, if you can actually come up and give a positioning statement like your BMW and like you know what you're doing, you'll either get knocked down and somebody will say this is never going to work and great, move on, or you'll have something that actually makes sense and you'll be able to go out and test that a little bit more rigorously in the real world.
And we did, Jackie alluded to this. Techstars was basically practicing our pitch, and it takes a lot of practice. I'm actually not very good at it relative to Jackie and TJ, and that's a pretty big statement, right? I mean, I helped found the company, and Jackie's better at this than I am, and it's because I don't spend any time during my day thinking about how to present this to the world or how to pitch it, and Jackie and TJ spent a lot of their day thinking about that stuff. So it takes not only a ton of practice to get there, but once you're there, it takes consistent practice to stay good at it. When we were in Techstars, TJ spent the first month meeting with mentors, and most of that was wasted time in terms of mentorship, but it was all very valuable time in the sense of teaching him how to give first a 30-second, a 60-second, a 5-minute pitch. And he was trying out pitch after pitch after pitch, trying slightly different audiences, slightly different targets, slightly different reasons why we were defensible, and people kept giving him great reasons why those things weren't going to work. And that was really what helped us refine it to make it a much, much better pitch. And then, when we got to the end of Techstars, we literally spent 3 weeks, full-time, day in, day out, doing literally nothing but practicing this 3-minute pitch that he was going to give on demo day. So really, it takes a long time to get to a great pitch. Jackie wasn't kidding when she said, these are the elements. This is like the cliff notes. But to actually get good, you're going to have to take these and go do a shit ton of work to get there.
But we would say that an important thing for it is to know what you're building for who and why it's awesome. So that's what we're going to go through right now. So these are all pretty tried and true elements of a positioning statement. If you've seen them before, we'll go through them again. If you haven't, this is probably going to be fairly useful because it really helps you break down a product or a service and think about, and we're going to hand this out to you in actual real dead tree format to make our exercise more useful. But so you want to think about it in a target, a segment, a brand, a category, a distinction, and why it's awesome. So this is pretty straightforward once you look at it, but your target is kind of the person you're building for. So for PillPack, that's anyone who takes 5 or more medications a day. And sorry, I just broke down both of those. So it's anyone who takes 5 or more medications a day is our segment. For PillPack, our category is we're a retail pharmacy. We're switching to PillPack is the same as switching to a Walgreens or a Rite Aid. But what makes us different is that we make it easy to take the right med at the right time. Because we offer convenient service, easy to use technology, and something else that I'm totally blanking on right now. And we just make it easy to use. And you can see that when we show you a video of what our product looks like.
I think one thing that is important to keep in mind is you should have a category. I think especially for, I know coming from an engineering background, you oftentimes want to talk about why no one else does this. And you're probably right, no one else does the thing that you do, but a lot of other people solve the problem that you're solving. And that, again, is going to be part of helping you choose a customer and choose what problem you're working on is actually defining what that category is. So for us, that category is retail pharmacy. Why does that matter? Oh, now all of a sudden we know our customers are choosing between us and CVS and Walgreens. And that's who we're trading off against. And it's really important for us to understand that to present ourselves correctly to the world. I think same thing. You have to understand who those other people are that you're effectively competing with, because you are definitely competing with somebody, even if what you do is radically different from what they do. And hopefully, it is distinct, right? Hopefully it is radically different than the way that they do it, but you're still solving a problem that somebody else solves.
Exactly.
So put together.
Put together, you end up with for target, who are segment, brand provides the category with distinction because of proof, which is not super useful. So we will give you some examples. Leave it a little bit out. Let's go to examples first. So you can all read, so I'll let you read that. But this is an example of how Amazon, for instance, would have positioned themselves back in the day. As you can see, they're like kind of long, so this makes up a decent part of your 60-second pitch. But it gets all of the information you need there, who you're selling to, why they have a problem, why you're different, and why someone would buy it.
Maybe one more.
So another one from Zipcar that we particularly like because they get so specific about who their consumer are is, and this is from the early days of Zipcar when they really were a very urban-based company.
I really love this, actually. I sympathize with this a lot recently because we've had to make a lot of decisions about exactly how do we present ourselves in our marketing materials, exactly what features do we prioritize. Really knowing about customers makes all that stuff so much easier. So for Zipcar, I can imagine how much easier their life would have been because they're like, no, that's it. Like, we are about urban dwelling, educated, techno-savvy consumers. I mean, once you make that claim, knowing how to find those people, knowing how to talk to them, knowing what marketing materials, that stuff gets really easy, or at least a lot easier.
Right. And when you get objections to people, like if someone says to Zipcar, well, what about the people who live 5 miles away from their nearest Zipcar thing? Well, no, we're for urban dwelling people. We already said that. Don't fight me about it because this is what we're building. They may fight you about your market size, they may fight you about something else, but at least you've knocked that objection off the table because you've narrowed down your audience of customers.
So like we said, we actually put these ads in order. But one last thing we want to point out, here's your person who's a potential customer. I think one of the other big pitfalls everyone always falls into is they want to talk about how they're selling a product. Remember, you're not selling a product. What you are selling is the awesome shit your person can do with said product. You're like Mario and you can shoot fireballs. You're not selling flour, you're selling fireballs.
All right.
Cool. So here's what we're going to do next. If you guys can all get into, we're going to do 4 groups.
I want this one back. 4 groups? 4 groups are going to be kind of big.
Okay, we're going to do 5 groups. Get into 5 different groups. I think that's, yes.
Okay.
And we're going to give you some things that you're going to construct a pitch around. We're going to give you like 10 or 15 minutes to kind of work through it together. And by pitch, we mean a positioning statement. So what we're hoping is by the end of these 10 or 15 minutes, you have an example of how you would pitch said object that we're about to give you. But before we give you those objects, please collect yourselves into kind of 4 or 5 groups. So grab like the 4 or 5 people around you, call that a group, and we'll kind of go through this.
Yeah.
We'll give you,
and you are going to pitch it to us and explain why we should invest in it.
So we present to you the Kleenex. This is what we call a tissue. Prior to tissue.
Prior to the tissue, there's no other product that is disposable, mobile, absorbent, and as well as soft, all in one.
We believe that you should use the right paper for the right hand. So that's what makes us completely unique. And we don't want you to use abrasive products on your beautiful nose.
All right.
Early testing has shown a reduction of viral and bacterial carriage on entities. And this is definitely a hygienic and medicinal side of things.
So we want moms and those who are ailing and have allergies to have hygienic, soft product called Kleenex, our product that provides doctors, pediatricians, schools, and offices, as well as others, disposable, the right and tissue with
Right tools for your
scientific
right.
knowledge.
Yes, absolutely. All right.
Perfect. All right, what was the best thing about that? Actually, sorry, we'll start on the next. What was the worst thing about that?
That people will probably
We sell toilet paper, right?
Well, I guess Mayor could have spoken up, Larry. I basically was saying that no other product could combine all of these different things, and I had mentioned disposability, absorbability, softness, and everything like that.
True, but we want to know what we're replacing. So we're
Yeah.
going to categories.
Oh,
Because if it's
One
something-
other
We're gonna
thing.
mention,
no, that's
Sorry.
next week. Yeah.
One other thing could have been a little bit better.
Try harder. Well, I think we're both thinking of the same thing.
What do you think?
I'm thinking of the target.
Yes. The target was a lot of targets, right? It wasn't one target, so that could have been a little better. Okay, what was awesome about that?
I liked it.
Yeah. What else is awesome about it?
I liked the demo for those of us who've never seen tissues before.
Which none of us have.
Understanding the
That's true,
application
that's true.
for this new novel thing that you're creating.
It's on sale.
The thing I love the most about it had all the elements, right? Like it did have a target, it did have a brand, it did have proof, it had all of these elements wrapped together. So I thought it was awesome. Really well done, always hard to go first, crushed it. Who's number two?
Could you help us tailor our target? Because what was the contention? I mean, I want to know because I want to adapt that.
Sure, I haven't answered it.
Yeah. Do you want to give your answer?
It's not about, there's no wrong target. We wouldn't know at least from that, right, what the right or wrong target is. Me personally, when I'm picking a target, it's some combination of size and acuity, usually with a heavy bias toward acuity. I always think your product, this gets said all the time, but I genuinely believe it after having made this mistake in my career. And you really don't want to create vitamins, you want to create painkillers. Painkillers are truly solving a real problem, and they're 10x better than what existed before. It's really hard to produce something that is 10x better than the thing that it is it's replacing. And so usually what you're really asking there is it 10x better for that target, right? And it's just so hard to get started that you want that 10x better piece. So the way I would have chosen a target is I would have said, for which of these targets are we just totally, uniquely crushing it in a 10x better way than we could than anything else that could possibly exist on the planet. But not everyone agrees with that. Some people would have said pick the biggest target. There are different logics for which target. The main critique was that you just want to pick a target, not so much which one.
Can I mention something? So it was actually my idea for all of us to have a little part of the presentation, and I think it would be better if we actually, we talked about our ideas and how we were going to do it, but we didn't actually do a solid run through, and therefore when we got up there, we were kind of like, whose turn is it? We're looking around at each other, and we kind of got a little fumbly, and I see that a lot in these presentations, so it's definitely important, I guess. to
Use the
see
space.
it.
Go find a room and practice the presentation.
Yeah, and don't hesitate actually to pick a person. TJ was the only one who pitched for us at Hacking Medicine, and in investor meetings, same thing. He's the only one who pitches. I go with him some of the time, though not all the time, and I am not pitching. He is pitching. I am there to support him in answers to key questions if they come up, and he feels like I have a better answer. But he's in control of the meeting. He's kind of delegating around, and I think that is really critical because it is usually easier for one person to give a good pitch than for
I would say one or two, because you can keep it fresh and like re-engage the audience like that with somebody else jumping up there. But I mean, it definitely depends on the team and the people up there. Keeping somebody's attention for 3 to 5 minutes is actually hard nowadays, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And I'd say even with media interviews, TJ is the only one who talks, not because Elliot isn't well spoken, he obviously is. It's just much easier to have one person focusing on the messages every time, the same thing. And to answer your focus question, that was a really good engineering answer. To give you a marketing answer, I would say it's okay for your target to be people, right? And then break it down in your segment. Because in healthcare especially, sometimes your target is for hospitals, for insurance companies. It's not always people. So for you guys, your target really is it's for people with runny noses, right? Like I think you don't need to overcomplicate it. If you're selling to customers, your target is people, and your segment is some group of people.
So the target is a problem, not a population.
The target is
a population.
it's a set of entities or people.
Right. It's perfectly fine for when you say target for that to be people, because in many cases it's going to be if you're a B2B business, it's going to be for telecommunications companies, right?
Or or could be for hospitals, and the segment is
Right.
academic medical centers.
And
Exactly.
ideally, if you could pick one and show that has the maximum impact.
For people with runny noses,
Ideally.
this is the, yeah.
Ideally, you pick one though.
I think the most important thing is to frame it as a single one. I think the distinction you're hearing from Jackie and I is Jackie's solving that problem by describing it in a way that makes the whole set of people that you mentioned a single entity.
Right.
So you described a bunch of different examples of people with runny noses, and she's saying, just describe it as people with runny noses. You'll get everybody, but it'll be in one encapsulated thing. And I am saying something slightly different, and there's no right answer. This depends a lot on what you're actually using this pitch for, because different pitches are useful for different contexts. And most of where Jackie is presenting this pitch is in media or marketing materials, and there probably much more important to be to speak uniquely to a set of people, but at the same time you want that set to be as large as possible, right? So PillPack wants to be about people taking medication, not just about this really specific segment of people who happen to have heart disease, et cetera. If we're pitching to investors, we're giving a much more specific explanation of why this is going to be a really, really unique solution for this very small group of people that's going to help us get off the ground. It's just a different kind of pitch. Those are the pitches I'm more used to giving, and in that context, my advice would be pick a much more specific target than just people who take medication. Start with people who have heart disease, who suffer from all of the following 5 frustrations with taking their medications correctly, or something like that, and then abstract out to why that problem probably actually applies to a bunch of other segments.
I got a question on, you showed that Amazon, what their pitch might be. Amazon starts as books, and then they're everything.
Yep.
How do you feel like I like the term beachhead market.
So Amazon is a great example because you should never confuse your vision and your positioning statement. And that was Amazon's positioning statement in 2001. That was not Amazon's vision. Amazon, if you go back to really early interviews before the company was actually started, if you listen to Bezos when he's still a hedge fund guy on Wall Street, he says, he does this great interview in like the late 80s or early 90s or something like that, where he talks about leaving Wall Street. He says, I'm going to leave Wall Street and I'm moving out to Seattle and I'm going to start an internet company because this internet thing is going to be really big and I am going to own some piece of the internet. And that's basically what it sounds like. And it was really crystal clear. Actually, his vision never would have made sense to anybody until now. Now you're like, actually, that's funny because you do control the bytes of the internet and you sell all the things that are on the internet and you're totally right. Your vision has been realized. You are like the infrastructure for the internet. That is totally an accurate statement. But it's funny because at the time, and for what they did for years after that, it wasn't obvious, right? I mean, they were first a bookseller, and actually before they were a bookseller, they sold a lot of things while they were figuring out which thing to sell. They realized after they'd been testing a bunch of different stuff that books worked really well. So then they started selling books, and that's what led to that positioning statement. And I think it's important because the positioning statement, they represented themselves to the world as that positioning statement. I don't think they would have been successful if they didn't, because consumers like you and me never would have thought to ourselves, oh, it's Amazon, I gotta go there for books. And if we hadn't thought that at some moment in time, they wouldn't have been successful. So they had to have that positioning statement, but that's different from his long-term vision, which is probably what he was pitching investors with, which was about owning this infrastructure for the internet.
Can you connect the positioning statement to a given pitch? And like, how much is this then part of a pitch? How much are they the same? How much are they different?
I think that anytime you're giving a pitch, you should really basically have the elements of a positioning statement in there. And there's no, we're trying to make this kind of abstract thing, which is how do you give a good pitch, into something really specific and tactical that we can actually teach. There's no replacement for practice. That's one of the things active medicine is all about. You're going to get up here, you're going to practice, and you're going to learn something from that. We're trying to encapsulate these ideas in something that you can take with you tonight. We don't have a better way of teaching that than a positioning statement, so that's what we're giving you. And I do genuinely believe that is the best sort of simplistic way to think about a pitch. But probably the most important thing is you have to remember who you're pitching to. And I kind of made this comment already, but every pitch is going to be a little bit different depending on who it's for and what the context is. If you're pitching to investors, you probably should be talking more about what the market size is. If you're explaining yourself to your end customers, they don't give a shit what the market is large. They in fact probably don't want to know about that. They don't want to be reminded in the frame that you're making money out of them. They want to understand how you're solving their problems. I do think for specifically the Hacking Medicine pitch, I would trend more in the direction of a positioning statement. You're probably going to give 2 pitches at Hacking Medicine, one at the beginning of the weekend and one at the end of the weekend. The one at the beginning of the weekend is really to attract other team members, to sound interesting, and that's where the positioning statement I think is especially effective, Because what the positioning statement is great for is explaining to why this thing should exist, right? It explains why it's unique. It explains where it sits in the context of the world. It's easy for everybody else to understand and easy for them to decide, yeah, I want to spend a week on this, right? That's a precious 48 hours you're asking them to invest in this thing that you're presenting to them. Even the presentation at the end, though, it oftentimes is framed a little bit more as an investor pitch, but I actually still think at its core, what most people want to hear is, why is this relevant to the world? Why should we encourage you? I mean, really, winning the hackathon is about encouraging you to keep working. That's the purpose of winning. So what the judges are really doing is saying, we want to be the most encouraging to this team. And they're not going to do that because the market sounds large or because you explain why you have this technology no one's ever thought of. They're going to do that because they believe you're trying to solve a problem that is a real problem and that doesn't have a good solution today. And I think, again, positioning statement does a better job of encapsulating all those elements than anything else. So it really should make up the core of your pitch.
And I'd say too that when you think about a pitch, I was helping a friend with an investor pitch deck last week, totally unrelated to healthcare. And he had all these elements that were really great and wanted to weave them into the deck. And what I was encouraging him to do was leave those out. What your deck needs to do, put them in an appendix, put it somewhere that's easily accessible, but leave them out of your core deck because what you want to do is get someone really excited so they're asking those questions. So if you're pitching to an investor, they're going to ask investor questions. If you're pitching to a customer, they're going to ask customer questions. The questions will be different, but if you can give them the understanding of where this fits in the world, and then you obviously have to have the answers to all those questions, but the thing you want to pitch is, let me get you to understand this thing so that then you can ask the questions that are most relevant to you.
Actually, as an example of that, one of the things that I loved the Techstars did, I thought it was the best device they gave us for crafting a pitch, was they had us do all of our slides in a one-liner. And so the whole presentation was like 15 seconds or 30 seconds or something like that. And they clicked for us. So Katie Ray was the one doing this. She sort of sat at the front and clicked on the laptop. And she was like, okay, go. And you'd be like, this is for people who take a lot of medication, next slide. And you would do that kind of sentence for every slide, and it became so crystal clear what was broken about your pitch instantaneously. And for us, we had these 4 slides in a row that were all product features. And the first slide, TJ was like, the product's really awesome. Next slide. Trust me, the product is really, really awesome. Next slide. Still awesome. And all of a sudden, it was just so crystal clear. We'd been working on this thing at this point for like weeks and weeks and weeks. We really thought it was a great pitch. And I've raised money before. Like, we weren't that raw at this. And still, the second he did that, I was like, oh my God, that's so bad. And it really does. It helps you rethink it. And again, it's in the same realm of a positioning statement, which is about taking these complex ideas that have lots and lots of detail and asking you to simplify things down and really get to the essence of it. And I think any device that helps you do that is going to be effective in making you push a lot.
Exactly. All right, let's carry on.
Group 2.
Group 2.
Let's do it.
This guy. What does this fascinating prototype bring to us?
Well, bread.
Oh, we're good.
We sell experience. We don't sell bread. Yeah, this is an experience. This isn't a product at all. We're doing. We are. Yeah, she's taking all that bread. All right.
Wow.
Okay, so this is an experiential product. We've designed it for time-pressed, convenience-seeking individuals who are seeking a truly euphoric experience. Club Bread provides you, our knights, our men in shining armor, with a pre-sliced bread to get you to the duck pond faster than anybody within the nursing home you're living in. Pick up Medicare-eligible beauties faster than anybody else with Club Bread, pre-sliced excitement.
Wow.
Club Bread. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to blow through these a little faster, but I want to point out one thing that was especially good about that. They were joking about it when they came to the front, but they said they're selling experience, and that's right? I mean, they didn't tell you how they sliced it. They didn't tell you why it was possible that they were going to be able to slice the bread. They didn't talk about how every slice was exactly the same size. It was none of those small details. It was much more about what you're going to get out of it. You're going to pick up some Medicare hobbies.
15 seconds into it to realize we're pitching to, we're selling this to men in Medicare homes. Might have got there slightly faster, other than that, I think.
Great job.
Strong work.
All right, third group, who's coming up? Hit it.
Can I borrow your thing known as a peanut? Just one. Got it. Okay, it's not gonna be a girl. Oh, I think we should be eating. I don't know what the answer
Okay.
I think we should just be eating all the time. We're gonna do demo. Okay. So this is a lovely cup of soda that I have backwashed my flu germs in. And oops, I just jumped it on my niece's high chair. Oh man. Oh darn. So I'm gonna take this thing right here. I don't even know what this is. It's just a thing. I'll go like that. Well, I kind of got it, but not really. There's still some on there. It's all of my hands froze. So we bring it.
So, for busy moms who want to protect their family and their kids from germs, we have this product that we call Lysol. It's a home cleaning product that is quick, efficient, and convenient because it kills 99% of germs in one wipe without the use of multiple products.
That is awesome.
This actually works.
I think that was the best about that. It was just such a clear articulation of the problem, right? And so never hesitate to find ways to articulate why this is such a big problem. I think especially in healthcare, you know, where you might be presenting to an audience that isn't the user. They may not perfectly understand the problem space. Finding ways to help make it crystal clear why this thing that you're about to solve is really truly a problem. Awesome.
And that's where, if you have the person on your team who's maybe in the healthcare space and understands the problem, telling a quick story is really efficient. Just like she's told a story at the beginning. Tell the story, make people understand. So, awesome.
That's awesome. Next group.
All right.
We're going with, we're excited about. In fact, we're going to be last but definitely not least.
Well, they have the, sorry, we sliced the bread. They have the coolest product.
So this is 1965, approximately. Your kid takes a lunchbox to school. Oh, you forgot it. What do? Okay, for the class-savvy mother who wants to give her child the best packed lunch, but is tired of having to replace lost lunchboxes, your best lunch to go provides clean, versatile, space-minimizing lunch bags that you can use once and throw them away. They're lightweight and recyclable, so you don't even have to worry about the environment. Unlike bulky lunchboxes and Tupperware that can get left behind in the schoolyard, your best lunch to go allows you to never lose a lunchbox again.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. What I liked about that was that it's super focused on the problem. Lost lunchboxes. Moms hate lost lunchboxes. This is a way to not lose a lunchbox. You didn't focus on, you heat sealed the sides so that none of your sandwich fixings are falling out. You really focused on this big problem that all moms in 1965 can sympathize with, which is a lost lunchbox. So I thought that was really good.
Well done. All right, last group. Let's hear it. We have a high hope.
Yeah.
This was a great and stellar product for you guys.
Now we're going all the way back to like 2nd century. I have no idea what year it was then with people.
Yeah. Okay. We don't have a
describing the scenario, right? So we have a notion of what experience we're going to get from this. That's awesome. Great job, everyone. That was fantastic. So, questions, thoughts?
So you had mentioned that when you pitched your co-pack, you sort of, or your co-founder was the one that you did pitches.
He always pitches, yeah.
So what are some of the other productive things that you can do when you're not the launch?
Everything
Do you mean like in the moment of the
In the
pitch?
moment, so like.
So at actually Hacking Medicine just wasn't up there. It was just him. Part of that was because we didn't want it to be obvious that we had been working on that. But I think more generally, you're there to support them, and you have to. So I used to be friends with a lot of poets, and poets talk about this as keying into the moment. And I think improv people will say the same thing, right? So what you have to, at least for me, what I'm doing in that moment is I'm not thinking at all about what the actual pitch should be and how it's going, because that's just going to make me critical and anxious, right? I'm going to be like, oh, God, he didn't hit the point. Like, shit, how do I get the point in there? And the whole purpose of this is not for you to be slipping in the points that he misses. It's for you to be making him or her, or whoever you're pitching alongside, at their absolute best. So you're just like mentally keyed into the moment of how can I make sure this person is giving their best possible pitch. And that's different for everybody, and that's why chemistry matters. It might be that you're just agreeing with them, it might be...
Oh my God, Elliot, like, let me tell this one thing that I just want to, while you're saying this. You forgot to mention that you shouldn't, like, just go with it. You know, if they screw something up, like, don't do that. You know, don't jump in. You know, they're going to screw something up. They're going to forget something. I think it's really important to just let them say their piece. And then, come up with a way to look at each other. You know, figure out, like, if I forget a thing, if this is more appropriate for you to answer, I'm going to nod over you and take it. But make it as smooth and not like that as possible.
And TJ and I practiced a lot. So we had, this was mostly at Techstars, but we had, again, Katie and Reed would act as investors, and TJ and I would sit there, and they would grill us, and they would do more absurd things than an investor was likely to do. So they would try to pick at that relationship and see how he handled it. I'm not suggesting you need to do that, certainly not for Hackathon, but it's just to say that there is a really important supporting role if you are ever in a room like that. And I don't think that's just investors. I think you could be consultants presenting to the client, right? It could be a sales meeting, it could be any number of things where you have a team presenting. And I think in those situations, your job is just to focus on how can I make this person at their absolute best, which probably has a lot less to do with cutting them off and reminding them of all the things they've forgotten, a lot more to do with actually focusing on them instead of the overall pitch.
If I can just add to that, actually, one thing that Jackie's doing right now, I don't know if any of you guys are noticing this, is she's looking at Elliot. So that, yeah, she's up there too, but if I start looking over at her, I'm going to notice she's looking at Elliot, and that's going to bring my attention back to him. Right. So that's also something that helps to bring it back to the speaker and bring it back to everybody. And I think, like, what I do in those situations is I actually listen. Like, actively listen to what they're doing and think about what they're saying. And don't think about it from, like, here's how I would have done that. Think about it like, what's he saying right now? And listen. And then, if he needs to look at me, I've been listening to the conversation. It's really hard to stand up there next to somebody and not talk and to actively listen. And I think that's a skill that you get to practice at a hackathon, which is great.
I actually have an idea to offer you guys. What if you could reduce the pill size and wrap it around liquid formulations? That would make it so much more convenient, right? I need to think about it. Okay, that's something you guys would think about. But what I wanted to ask you was this. Doesn't PillPack encourage polypharmacy? You know what I mean?
Encourage polypharmacy?
Do you mean encourage people to take more medication?
It makes it more convenient, so it's a plausible excuse for doctors to prescribe more medications because it's just convenient for the patient to take it. So that's an incentive, right? Have you considered that?
Having had that conversation offline, that doesn't feel especially appropriate for sort of wrapping up the how to pitch an idea. So I'm going to keep us on track, but more than happy to discuss that offline.
Absolutely.
How would your strategy differ between pitching a product and a service?
Question. I don't know that it would. But
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's
One would be more like a theory or an idea, like an operational strategy versus, let's say, a physical product.
it probably has more to do with how you explain the differentiation than anything. And again, this is probably something that wouldn't necessarily be in a positioning statement, it might be in an investor pitch. So I don't think you need to worry about this for hacking medicine pitch. I don't think defensibility needs to really come into it. But I think if you were pitching a product and you're pitching it to an investor, you need to explain why no one else can build this product or something about this product is defensible. I think if it's a service, the way you explain the defensibility is very different. And I mean, that's a good point. So for PillPack, one of our pieces of defensibility is our claim is that CVS and Walgreens would have a very hard time changing their current operational model to the one that we have. And so they might understand everything that we're doing and still not be able to do that. And untested if that's actually accurate or not, but that's our claim. And that's very different from saying we have a bunch of patents and we have this product that's extremely difficult to build or would be very hard to reverse engineer, and so we're literally the only ones who are going to be capable of producing this. Okay, that would be Apple's defensibility. Okay, Apple's like, no one else can make a phone where the screen goes all the way to the edges.
And I'd say specifically for hacking medicine, if you're pitching a product, you should have some kind of a prototype, whether it's just some visualization of it. If you're pitching a service, you should think about how to proxy a prototype, because they're going to want to be able to kind of see what you're going to be doing. It's a lot harder to have that, but you want to have some kind of a proxy so that people can really get their minds around what you're doing.
You said when you were going through the hackathon yourself that you guys had all the expertise on your team, so maybe utilizing the mentors wasn't as big for you. But if you were participating in this Marches hackathon and didn't have all those expertise on your team, how do you think you can make the best use of mentors?
I think you just want to be really diligent on what you do. You want to work hard to figure out what you don't know. Mentors are going to walk around. You're going to know someone meeting, so you don't have to worry about how do I get in touch with the right mentor. So I think you want to be more focused on how do I make good use of the time when they show up, and that's probably more about what do I not know, and don't have to hesitate to tell them to go away. I think probably the more likely pitfall is not that you don't utilize them well, it's that you utilize them too much and waste your time and
Yeah, one thing we're going to try for this hack that we keep saying we're going to do for our past hacks that we're going to do for this hack is, have you guys ever been to a Brazilian barbecue?
Yes.
And there's red and green when you want more meat and red when you don't. We're going to do that with mentors for this hack, because at some point you're just like, I just want to hack, you need to get away. But at some point you're like, we really need your help, so we're going to try that with this hack, Brazilian barbecue.
Yeah, so as you guys know, I organize hackathons for a living, so I just have a few more thoughts to add on the most common things that I see kind of go wrong for teams up there while they're presenting. And it's timing. One, it's definitely timing. You can't get through 20 slides and a demo in 5 minutes. So yeah, definitely don't spend too much time defining the problem. I've seen teams spend more than half their time defining the problem. And that's a very important part of the presentation, but you gotta just do it and then talk about the solution. But one great way to define the problem is to talk about the consequence to the world without your product. Our taxpayers are gonna lose $1 million a year or continue to lose $1 million a year without this. That's something that resonates right away. The other thing is not using all your time. I mean, a lot of people try to go over or don't get to everything they want to, but then others don't use all their time. And the question and answers portion, if there is one, is really important. That's the last thing that people hear from you. So you should have a couple of canned questions, because a lot of times there's been so many presentations and people are like, they don't know. I mean, they might not have any questions. It's not because you didn't have a good presentation, maybe you covered everything so well, but you should definitely take advantage of all the time that you can and have somebody on your team have a few canned questions in case nobody in the audience has any or doesn't have a good one, so that you can end it on a really strong question and really drive the point home again one more time. And the last thing that is so important is to speak up, because people, you have to speak way louder than you're used to. And I've seen so many people get up there and they're with the microphone over here and there and there. When you hold the microphone, you hold it right up to your mouth. So, I mean, if you have one of those types of microphones, do that. If you don't, then just project, like you guys are doing so well, but, don't get up there and be mumbles and beat, because people will just stop listening. So, yeah.
And I think that's a great way to end it, but for the entire, speak up. Use your voice, talk to people, meet people, get to know people, hug them. and have an awesome time.
Thank you guys very much for joining us. Thank you for We are done. The evening is not over. Thank you again.
Hey guys, thank you so much for coming in. Allie and I and Hacking Medicine wanted to give a special shout out. Not only did Jackie and Elliot provide this workshop tonight, but they also sponsored tonight. So thanks to PillPack, Elliot, and Jackie for
Like I said, we're ridiculously happy you're here. We are happy to help you in any way we can.
Love PillPack. So thank you all so much for coming. Get excited. 2 weeks from now is the Grand Hack Fest. It's going to be incredible. We have an unbelievable lineup with the 5 tracks that Allie mentioned. We have the CEO of Iora Health, CMOs of payers and insurers coming, and 300 plus of your closest friends in the health tech community. It's going to be incredible. The bomb. Any other comments? So we're just so excited that you're here tonight and that we're going to get to know you a little bit more in 2 weekends. So get excited. Woo!